here is somebody who decided to target Christians. He apparently, and from what we read, apparently he asked what religion they were, and he shot the Christians. At least that's the current report. I don't think, however, that deciding that something like this and the political result you don't get is a demonstration that the system has failed. A demonstration that, in fact, Americans do not favor gun control, but more importantly, that Americans do not favor knee-jerk reactions to tragedies like this. This is not necessarily completely about guns. The biggest, up until 9/11, for instance, the biggest terrorist attack in this country was a domestic attack on a school in Michigan, and there wasn't a single gun that was involved. It was a bomb. A farmer who wasn't happy with his property taxes blew up a school. To say that it's guns that did this only makes it easier. It doesn't do anything about, maybe we should be making a bigger discussion about mental health issues, for instance, although I can tell you that with the possible exception of Charles Whitman, the guy who shot all the people in Texas in 1966, people who commit crimes like this don't think they're crazy. So I don't support knee-jerk reactions and knee-jerk answers that don't deal with that don't prevent anything from happening. I mean, what law are you going to create that would have prevented this from happening? What law would you create that would have prevented Sandy Hook from happening? You can pass as many laws as you feel like. You cannot change bad hearts.
John.
I'd like to try. I'm an American, and I believe we can do things. I believe we can get things right. I know that there are folks who think the status quo is always satisfactory. I'm not one of them. And I happen to be of the view that when you have repeated incidents of this kind, you have to start to ask yourself questions about what works and what doesn't work. My argument would be that the current system in our politics doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. And we are unable to respond as a country in the way that we should to a huge tragedy. I tend to agree with Steve that these are particularly unsettling moments when you hear that Christians are targeted, just as I would have the same view if Muslims or Jews or non-believers were targeted. When people are able to take their hatreds and attach them to a gun and walk into a community college or an elementary schoolroom and kill a lot of people very fast. And especially at a school that is as prepared as this one was. Remember, they had done trainings. They knew how to do lockdowns. They had mental health services available. They had taken all the steps, at least from what we hear in those initial reports. They had security. And still, something didn't work. As an American, I like the idea of trying those next steps, looking for ways that you can take sensible action to not assure, I don't think we can guarantee, but to raise the possibility that this might not happen again. And at the very least, I'd like to see our Congress have a realistic debate about it, an open, honest debate. And you know what the weird thing is? We don't even do that. We bury these discussions in back rooms and filibusters and, the petty gamesmanship of Washington. This is not a country that is working politically. It's a wonderful, great country. It's a country I love with all my heart and soul. But I am so deeply disappointed in our politics on a day like this.
Let's go to Art in Milwaukee. Hi, Art.
Hi. Well, according to Democracy Now! This morning, this is the 291st mass shooting in this year alone, defining 4 or more killed as a mass shooting, 43rd or something at a school this year alone. And, of course, we had the Oak Creek targeted shooting of the Sikh community. So something has to be done. John's completely right. I don't know what the answer is, but somehow we've got to break loose this log jam and start protecting our people.
All right. Let's let Steve respond. Bring it back.
One thing that comes out every time that there is one of these tragedies that takes place is that there is a list of federal and state laws that the shooter violates. There were, I believe, back in the 90s when Columbine happened, those two violated, I believe it was like 15 federal laws even before they started killing people. Laws exist, and laws are obviously not the answer. It is obvious that criminals don't care what gun laws are taking place. I think the second caller making the point about how here is, one tragedy taking place in Oregon, and this weekend in Milwaukee, there will undoubtedly be shootings and people may get killed. In Chicago, there will be more. In places like New Orleans and New York City and other places, there will be shootings, and they will not get nearly the kind of media attention that this does. But as I said, you can't. You could pass as many laws as you feel like, and you're not going to change the motivation of somebody who's decided to do something as abominably evil as this guy did yesterday in Oregon.
Yeah. So, Steve, nothing. We just can't do anything about it, and just let's move on. Or what do you think?
Well, what is it you're going to do? I mean, if and I don't know the gun he used, but he could have taken 2 6-shot revolvers and killed as many people as he would have with, you talk about banning semi-automatics or, limits on magazines or something like that. Those clearly, it's pretty obviously that's not going to work. The other thing is that you hear comparisons between the U.S. and other countries. Well, you know what? The other countries have mass violence events also. They may not involve guns. Sometimes they actually do. The fixation on this, the focus on this should not be on the gun violence part. The gun is just a tool. Why don't you ask the question of why somebody thought that his religious views apparently were such that he needed to go out and kill Christians yesterday?
Yeah, let's, John, let's get a concluding remark on what's going to happen now following this event as far as you can see.
I'm afraid that as a country we've all learned our talking points. We live in an era now where everybody's a pundit. And so everybody knows how to put their lines out and move the emotions aside, move the humanity aside. I like that we're having this discussion. I appreciate Steve's remarks. I appreciate the fact that as a country, we do pay a lot of attention to this. I don't want to live in an America that doesn't get shaken and upset and struggle and wrestle and maybe not have answers when something like this happens. I want us to be a country that does get shaken, upset, that struggles, that looks for answers. And I think most Americans do. Over a coffee table. I was in Ohio yesterday, and this came up, and I was in an Italian restaurant. Everybody's talking about it, all sorts of ideas. I only wish that our Congress, that our politics, would minimally reflect the humanity of this country, and that we would struggle and wrestle and try to find answers. Our Congress does not do that. It meticulously and carefully shuts down, and it does so because a very powerful industry uses a lot of political pull to make sure that we do not have honest debate about violence that kills thousands of people.
This is the Week in Review. I'm Joy Cardine, talking today with John Nichols and Steve Prestigard about the top stories in politics this week.